If you guys know a thing or two about modern Russia, then you might know that Russia doesn't exactly have a lot of freedom of speech. It is basically the norm at this point for people in Russia to be arrested for comments on the internet, street interviews, private conversations, and so on, and I've talked about it many times on this channel. However, the most annoying thing about all of this is that the strict Russian law that is not allowing anybody to say anything actually doesn't really apply to everyone. And in fact, certain powerful people get away with saying things that otherwise, according to the Russian law, would basically send any normal regular person to prison. What is up, everybody? It is your boy Roman, your favorite neighborhood Russian, and in today's video, guys, we are going to be talking about how there is no rule of law in Russia. So let's get right into it. What am I talking about? Essentially, recently on Russian TV, on one of Vladimir Solovyov's shows, actually, I'm pretty sure you should know who Vladimir Solovyov is at this point, a famous Russian propaganda pundit, a deputy of the Russian State Duma, and also an ex-military general of the Russian army, Andrei Gurylev, had a very interesting speech about people who do not support Putin in Russia. Let's check it out. Surely he's not gonna say anything outrageous.
Сегодня были там предложения выборы отменить президента. А зачем? Даже если мы все будем ходить тут носу ковыряться, президент победит на выборах. Это не заслуга кого-то, это его личная заслуга. Я железно знаю, что он победит капитально, так что не снилось все эти швали, которые там Макроны, Байдены там и все. Это состояние нашего общества.
So yes, we didn't get to the part yet, however, already pretty interesting because first of all, he's clearly drunk. Like, overall this clip just gives off the vibe of that classic video in Russia, the meme where it's this drunk guy that's like saying slurs at Obama and like America, etc. It's an absolute classic and, you know, a great example of what is going on in the average, you know, alcohol-infested vatnik brain.
Хочу, блядь, сказать этому ебаному Обеме. Ебаный ты козел, нахуй.
This is the norm now. But yes, he's clearly drunk, and also he's talking about the idea of canceling the elections in 2024 in Russia. Yes, there's a new election coming up actually very soon, and a bunch of propaganda pundits in Russia have been saying that we need to cancel the election altogether because Vladimir Putin is the only man that can save the country right now and lead the country into the beautiful, great future. So he's saying we don't need to do that because Putin will win no matter what. I mean, we do know that. It's not like you guys have been falsifying every single election for the last 15 years. It's just like, duh, you know?
И вот я хотел бы, чтобы в этом нашем обществе, которое сегодня доверяет на 80% президенту, а это именно тот показатель сплочения, который есть на сегодня, чтобы вся вот эта вот гниль, которая осталась, она должна быть, ну если не изолирована, то хотя бы как-то уничтожена.
Essentially, he said that 80% of the Russian population supports Vladimir Putin, which is a number that's kind of debatable in my opinion too, especially in an authoritarian country where you can't really do honest polling. I'd say these percentages are as trustworthy as the election results that are coming up. But yes, according to Mr. Gurylev, 80% of Russians support Putin. However, the 20% of Russians, who he has described as scum, he's saying that these people need to be ostracized in some way or isolated in some way, or if not isolated, then destroyed. And you know, guys, I really have no questions at this point, to be honest. They feel like they can literally get away with anything at this point, so they will say anything. This is why we get propaganda pundits saying that we need to nuke Siberia. I got a video about that as well, check it out. Am I surprised by this? Not really, I guess. I mean, Russia has been shitting on the traitors and especially the people who left Russia as well. There's been propaganda videos regarding that. So yeah, this is nothing really new to me as a fellow traitor of Russia, but what is interesting is that a Russian opposition group actually filed a report to the ethics committee of the Russian State Duma regarding, you know, the words said. And by the way, that ethics committee is led by Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space, by the way. I mean, she once was the first woman in space, now she's just a Z fanatic. Anyway, that was just a little quick factoid for you. Here's the response though. Having looked at your inquiry that we received at the ethics committee, we have this to report. According to the Article 29 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation, yes, one of my favorite fictional books of all time, the expression of one's opinion and personal position regarding certain questions of socio-political and socio-economical life of the state is an undeniable right of the deputy of the State Duma, and that right is protected by the Russian law. Additionally, we would like to say that the usage of metaphors or so-called figures of speech in the Russian language is not an insult and is used in order to clarify the thoughts of the speaker. That being said, your position and the points that have been listed in your reports have been sent to the deputy of the State Duma, Gurylev. I mean, this is just amazing, because this is exactly where we get to the hypocrisy of how the Russian law actually is applied. Let's say we have a population of 140 million people in Russia, right? And if 20% of those people do not support Putin, then the deputy Gurolev has essentially called for killing of 28 million Russians. So, well guys, guess what? That is actually a protected right under the constitution, which gives him the right to say his opinion in his personal position. What a free country we have, guys. You know, they say America invented freedom. No, I think Russia did. And here they're also saying that using figures of speech and metaphors, by that I guess I mean the word gnil, it is actually not an insult, and it's just there to make him, you know, clearer. I also love the end where it says that your position and your points have been sent to the state deputy Gurolev. So essentially it's also a threat. They're like, yeah, you're wrong, but also we just let the guy know, so now you're going to prison actually for daring to fucking even try to act like you have rights in this country. So yes guys, that's pretty bad, but this hypocrisy goes even further because it affects real lives. Let's take the case of Moscow municipal deputy Alexei Gorinov, for example. He was a local municipal deputy in Moscow who, shortly after the start of this special military operation, had the nerve to raise the question of the morality of what's happening at one of the meetings of the municipal district committee or whatever, council. And essentially here's what he said. How can we talk about a children's drawing contest for Children's Day or organizing dance recitals for Victory Day when there are children dying every day? And he essentially also said that Russia's civil society should be trying to stop what is happening. So yes, he just made an anti-war statement in the audience of other governmental officials. There were probably like 20 people present, maybe, right? And guess what happened to the guy? He was actually the first person ever in Russia to be actually jailed for the new crime of discrediting the armed forces of the Russian Federation, which is a felony that could land you from anywhere from like 5 to 15 years in jail. And Alexei Gorinov, this municipal official in Moscow, was sentenced to 7 years in prison. And yes, he's still in prison now, and he's reporting that, you know, these conditions there are terrible and everything, as obvious. So yes, guys, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? I mean, calling for the death of 20% of the citizens of Russia, which is millions and millions of people, well, that's just his opinion, guys. Just a little heated gamer moment, guys. Happens to everybody. Let's just let him loose, okay? The Committee of Ethics says it's fine. However, if you dare to say that children dying in a war is bad, 7 years of prison, bro. Come on. Yeah, I can totally see how that's normal. However, jailing a pacifist for 7 years? That's fine. Yeah, Russia is a democratic country where law exists. Sure, I agree. Alright, here's another case of Yuri Kakhovets. I actually already talked about this guy on my channel in the video which I did about street interviews in Russia. Essentially, Yuri Kakhovets is a resident of Moscow who gave an interview on the streets, and he was asked the question of whether Russia should try to normalize its relationship with the West and other countries, and he basically said yes, and he went on a pretty long anti-war, anti-Putin tangent, basically, you know, said a bunch of things that are no-no in Russian society today. And yes, guys, I'm pretty sure you already know how the story ends. This man is currently on trial and is currently facing up to 10 years in prison for that street interview, for daring to disagree with the politics of his government. You guys might say, you know, what else did they expect, right? And also, censorship in times of war exists in every country. Okay guys, and I'm gonna give you an example of Russia before 2022. Here's a story that made a lot of waves, for example. A stand-up comic, a citizen of Belarus who lived in Russia, Idrak Mirzalizadeh, essentially was on a comedy podcast. During this podcast, the topic of rents and apartments came up, and landlords, and also the xenophobia in Russia that exists when you're trying to rent an apartment, which is a real thing, by the way. A lot of people in Russia who are non-Slavic looking, so to say, sometimes have issues with renting an apartment because certain people just say "Только для славян," only for Slavs, because essentially they don't want the immigrants to live in their apartments. And Idrak, this comic that I'm talking about, being himself of Azerbaijani descent, he was essentially making a joke about how xenophobia is stupid. So what he said was that he was once thrown out, that he once moved into an apartment and there was an old mattress there that was covered in shit stains, and that he had to throw it out, and also that the tenant that lived before him in the apartment was Russian. So he basically made a joke how all the Russians, you know, just shit themselves and, you know, in bed or whatever. Obviously, the whole joke here is that it's stupid to sort of judge an entire nation of people by like one person. So yeah, that's all that happened, right? It was just a comedy podcast. It's a joke. Who gives a fuck? Well, Russian propaganda does, because Russian propaganda pundits, for example, Solovyov, basically were ripping endlessly on this guy for like weeks. started basically endlessly ripping on this guy for like weeks, and it actually led to the comic Idrak being assaulted on the streets, then arrested for 10 days and deported from Russia without the right to ever come back. So he's essentially completely banned from Russia as a citizen of Belarus. He's probably not exactly very mad about that now, but still, that's kind of fucking insane, isn't it? And can you guys just imagine something like this happening in America? With just some like dipshit like Brendan Schaub or whatever the fuck says some dumb shit on the podcast, and then, I don't know, like Tucker Carlson is like on live TV, you know, talking about it for 2 weeks, saying how he's like a traitor of Russia or something. I mean, honestly, that's already happened before with Hassan in his 9/11 comments, but Hassan didn't get deported from the United States of America for saying that, right? Although some freedom-loving conservatives would probably say that he should be. Once again, if you make a joke in which you say that Russians shit themselves, ironically, as a joke that makes fun of xenophobia, and then that joke is completely taken out of context and you just get ripped on and deported from the country, well, he completely deserved it, I think. But when a state official says that we should kill 30 million Russians because they don't like Vladimir Putin and they don't vote for Vladimir Putin, no, I mean, that was just his opinion. And actually, yeah, exaggerated language is not an insult. He's just making his point come across more clearly, guys. Yeah, neither was Russians shit themselves an insult too. But this guy still got deported and his life got ruined for a little bit. I'm pretty sure now he's actually like low-key happy that this happened. But yes, this is how it goes. And literally in Russia, if you just dare to poke your nose out a little bit, if you just dare to say something that does not coincide with the current thing that the propaganda is pushing, it's over. And no, it's not the same as in the West where you just get cancelled or whatever. Here you're actually facing like real prison time and real trouble with the law, you know what I mean? And that is not the same thing at all. Or another example, right at the top of my head, this happened in 2020, I think. The Russian rapper Morgenstern, he's like the crazy Russian 6ix9ine type character. I have a video about him too. This was years ago, but he had an interview with Ksenia Sobchak, a Russian journalist. And during this interview, they started talking about the day of victory in Russia, and Morgenstern dared to say that maybe, perhaps, we shouldn't be spending so much money on this entire parades and all these, fireworks and all this like turbo patriotism, and that instead maybe we should just, help the veterans or like help the people in need or whatever with this money that's being wasted. Which is, by the way, not even like a really hot take. People have been saying this shit for the last 15 years. Even some boomers in Russia would say this, honestly. However, holy shit, when he said that, the shitstorm was absolutely insane. Every single propaganda pundit, TV channel, etc. was just basically shitting on Morgenstern, saying that this is a traitor of Russia, look at this is the youth of Russia, they don't even understand why the day of victory is so important.
Он не просто обесценил нашу главную скрепу, он ее не понял.
Из года в год тратятся на это миллионы, это празднуют. Не знаю, скрепы, может, это какие-то... Я не понимаю.
They want to basically erase our history. Morgenstern's words should be checked for extremism and, terrorism or whatever. And actually, yes, there's also a relatively new law in Russia that's been passed, which is called disrespecting veterans. So essentially, they were trying to start like a criminal case against Morgenstern for like disrespecting veterans because he said that perhaps money should be spent differently during Victory Day, and perhaps Victory Day should be slightly changed. And among others, actually that was one of the reasons why Morgenstern decided to leave Russia, to just be better safe than sorry, right? And of course, he was getting angry messages and threats and all of that. So yes, guys, I repeat it once again. Saying that 20% of Russians who don't agree with Putin should be destroyed, that's completely fine. But saying that perhaps we should treat Victory Day slightly differently, it's over. You're a traitor of Russia and you should go to jail. I love it. I really do love it. And you guys gotta understand, this lawlessness has basically ingrained itself in every single side of Russian life. For example, just recently in the city of Makhachkala in Dagestan, a huge mob of people, that was probably over 1,000 people large, essentially raided the airports of Makhachkala because there were reports of a quote-unquote Jewish refugee plane flying in from Israel to Dagestan, which was actually fake information. However, there was a flight from Israel that came in, and essentially tons of people ran into the airport, actually managed to get to the landing strip itself, and they were harassing people, there were clashes, etc., and it was pretty crazy. And what happened is that, yes, some people got arrested, 80 people got arrested, but most people just walked completely fine. And once again, I do find it very ironic because in Russia, for example, if like, 5, 18-year-old kids come out on the streets and stand with like a blank piece of paper or a piece of paper that says something vaguely anti-governmental, they're immediately getting arrested, just swept off of the streets. And if there's any sort of anti-governmental protest going on, there's gonna be a lot of police there. However, when you have thousands of people that have rushed into an airport looking for Jews, self-describedly, I don't even know if that's a real word, but anyway, well then that's not as bad, I guess. That's fine, because, you know, they were not really threatening Vladimir Putin. Now, if they were, then come on, those terrorists have to immediately be removed from the streets. If you don't like Vladimir Putin, you're basically a terrorist at this point. That's what it is. You're like a second-class citizen. And you know, once again, rule of law in Russia, I mean, this is kind of a joke. We're not even talking about the fact how Russia doesn't even have a proper recognized border currently. And also, yeah, Prigozhin. Remember that entire mutiny thing he had, after which there was a criminal case started against him, but then they were like, oh, we actually shaked it behind the scenes, which is like, what the fuck is that? What is this? Это реально жизнь не по законам, а по понятиям, блять. Like, what the fuck is that? Why are things like this being discussed by the boys behind the scenes? But yeah, they discussed it all, they squashed the beef, so the criminal case was actually cancelled. And actually all the Wagner soldiers that also took part in the mutiny, they're also all basically pardoned. But by the way, also during the mutiny, some pro-Kremlin channels actually reported that several jets and helicopters were taken down, and that several actual Russian army soldiers were killed. Was anybody from Wagner that was taking part in the mutiny ever held accountable for these people's deaths? I guess not. Why would you do that? We have, you know, 18-year-old kids to catch that are, you know, standing around with blank pieces of paper. We need to catch people that are commenting things against Putin online. If we do that, that will fix our country. And guys, what do I have to say? It just shows that in Russia there is absolutely no rule of law at this point. People get away with anything as long as they're in the right group, in the right class. The law does not apply equally to everybody. And once again, in Russia, this is nothing new. The people in power have always been getting away with pretty much anything, and the regular people have to suffer because of it. And I know a lot of you guys are gonna say, because a lot of you guys comment this on my channel saying, but Roman, you gotta understand, it's not only like that in Russia. In the West also, the rich get richer and more powerful and get away with everything, and the poor people also suffer and go to jail. Yes, but it doesn't happen in the same way, does it? And yes, the police in America, for example, is not perfect, but it does not do the things that Russian police does. But it's always just been like this in Russia, and honestly feels like something that's here, you know, since the Soviet times. And that's just something that always has annoyed me very deeply. And it's actually one of the reasons why, looking at it now, I do not want to kind of return to Russia in a sense, because I refuse with my only option essentially to just be silent or to distance myself so that it doesn't touch me, you know? I cannot ignore things like this, because when we have such blatant examples of inequality, when it comes to even how these repressive laws work, I think it's pretty obvious that we truly have a very flawed society and a very flawed system. And all I really want is just to live in a country where I'm treated fairly, and when I have as much of a, you know, humanity as other people. I would like to live in a country like that personally, you know? Because human rights are pretty cool. And you know, living your entire life and just going through this entire endless cycle of humiliation from the governments, I don't know, I'm done with it. And I just really, really hope that one day Russia would actually be a country where people would be equal under the law, under God or whatever. Because this, I mean, this certainly is not it, chief. Anyways guys, yeah, I guess that's going to be pretty much it today's video. If you guys did enjoy it, then please make sure to slap the like on it. As well guys, if you would like to support this channel additionally, if you like what I do, then please make sure to go over to the link down in the description where you can become a YouTube member. It's basically like YouTube's own version of Patreon. It's the best way to support me. It's like a monthly donation type of thing. Or if you want to just do a one-time thing, then you can do a super thanks underneath this video. Anyways guys, that is gonna be pretty much it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.